This case begins with something complete, just a love seat that needed to be repaired. But that piece of furniture and 13 inches of cord the killer never realized he had left behind would expose what happened inside a fashionable Manhattan apartment in 1936. Before we get all the way there, though, you need to know about Nancy. Nancy Evans Titterton was 34 years old, a book critic and rising fiction writer who published under the name Nancy Evans. One of her stories had recently appeared in a literary magazine, and she was working on her first book. She lived at 22 Beekman Place with her husband Louis, who was an executive at NBC. Nancy wasn't merely adjacent to New York's literary world, she was building a place of her own in it. On Good Friday of April 10th of 1936, Louis left for work at about 8:30 in the morning. He called Nancy shortly after 9, and everything seemed normal. At around 10:15, Nancy spoke with her friend Georgia and wrote down directions for dinner for the following evening. She was cheerful and talkative. It was the last known conversation, though, of her life. By 11:30, something had changed. A tailor's delivery boy rang the bell, but no one answered. At about 4:15 that afternoon, upholsterer Theodore Kruger and his assistant, John, arrived to return the Tittertons' repaired love seat. The building door was open, and the apartment door was ajar. The two men carried the furniture inside and began looking for Nancy. They were not prepared for what they found. They found Nancy in the bathtub. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Investigators believe she had still been alive, although likely unconscious when she was placed into the water. Her death immediately became known in the newspaper as the Beekman Place Bathtub Murder, and police assigned dozens of detectives to the case. But the apartment offered remarkably little evidence. There were bits of mud on the bed and beneath Nancy's body, a strand of horsehair on the bedspread, a stiff piece of cord measuring just 13 inches. Nothing astronomical, nothing that just spoke out, hey, we know who it is. Now, though, the horsehair is the detail that gets most of the attention in later retellings, and it was important. It connected the bedroom to the kind of material that was used in the upholstered furniture. But the cord was the clue investigators could really follow. Police and lab specialists identified unusual plant fibers in the twine. Detectives even then worked backwards through 3 states, contacting 25 cordage manufacturers until they traced the cord to a Pennsylvania company, then to a New York warehouse wholesaler, and finally to one of Manhattan upholstery businesses, which was Theodore Kruger's shop. And this is where the case turns. Kruger's assistant, John, had already been inside Nancy's apartment the day before her death to collect the love seat. He had a criminal record, and police had quietly kept him under surveillance almost from the beginning. They also learned that he had arrived late for work on the morning of the murder and had lied about where he had been. When the detectives confronted him with the cord, John's story collapsed. According to the confession announced by police and prosecutors, John admitted that he had returned to Nancy's apartment that morning carrying upholstery twine. He gained entry by claiming that he needed to discuss where the repaired love seat should be placed. Once inside, he attacked Nancy, bound her wrists, and strangled her with garments fashioned into a noose. He then moved her into the bathtub and removed the binding cord, apparently believing he had taken every piece of evidence with him. Clearly, he missed the cord. John was charged with first-degree murder. At trial, his attorneys focused on his mental condition, relying in part on an earlier psychiatric assessment that had described him as potentially psychopathic and paranoid. The prosecution's experts testified that he understood what he was doing and knew that it was wrong. After deliberating for 19 hours, the jury convicted him on May 28th of 1936. He was sentenced to death, and New York's highest court later upheld the conviction. On the night of January 21st of 1937, John was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. The forensic work in this case was groundbreaking, but Nancy should not be remembered simply as the victim in a famous horsehair mystery. She was a writer on the edge of a major new chapter, one that she never had the chance to even finish. And in the end, the man who tried to erase what he had done was undone by something almost impossibly small: one overlooked length of cord. Go ahead and follow me for more true crime updates.